All right. Again, thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope some more people will join us as we go through. My name is Itzik Akiva. I'm an online gaming consultant. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years now, both as an operator, as a consultant to different operations. And basically what we'll be doing today is give you a teaser of the online gaming management masterclass course that will be held in June. Essentially, the idea here is to share with you some of the content that we have and also kind of explain a bit more about the approach that I have towards teaching this course and the approach that I have towards the online gaming operations in general. Today's training and also the training that will be held in June is obviously held by the Gaming Operations Academy in collaboration with Aliyah. Aliyah is our sponsor for this event, and this is a game aggregator that I will be talking about a little more later on in this webinar. I ask that everybody keeps their microphone muted and camera off. If you'd like to ask questions, you can either post it in the chat, or we will also have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of this session. I'll leave plenty of time for that. So with that being said, let's get started. Just a word about what is the Online Gaming Management Masterclass and what is this chapter here that we will be going through. So the Online Gaming Management Masterclass is a full training that we've been running for the past, I'd say, 6+ years. Essentially, this training is meant for executives and managers that will be overseeing multiple aspects of the gaming operation. We focus primarily on casino, but we do touch on other verticals as well. And the idea in the way we prepare this training is that it is very vertical agnostic, meaning it doesn't matter if your company or yourself focus primarily on sports betting, or on casino, or poker, or bingo. The idea is that there are a lot of the basic elements that apply towards everything that you do, and this is what I'll be presenting primarily today. After covering a lot of the basis, we are then diving into more specific topics that are, let's call them deep dives, for things like content management and bonus management and other things of that sort. But more on that down the road. And let's just jump into some of the content that we have. So today's chapter, the one that I'll be presenting, is essentially presenting the online gaming ecosystem, how all of the primary components are mapped and how do they all influence each other. The idea is that we cannot only focus on one element in our operation in isolation. They all do have impact on other things. There's no one thing that will determine the success or the challenges within your operation. And it's really important to understand how we tackle this. Now, whether you're new to gaming or your company is new to gaming, or whether you are veterans, this is just an idea or a suggestion of how we organize ourselves, our thought process. So when we look at the online gaming ecosystem, we tend to explain that in this Olympic rings type of structure. We separate them into multiple topics. The first one will be regulations and compliance. We'll be looking at products and games and suppliers, marketing, payments, player protection, and operator protection for that matter. These are some of the topics that I'll be going over today. And obviously in the course itself, we dedicate a lot more time to each one of them. So this today was just going to be a quick taste of those. Whenever we start, and this is coming from many years of experience with consulting to different operators, both new to the game and those that are expanding into new verticals or to new markets. In today's gaming industry, the idea is always to understand what are the regulations, what are the standards. If back in the days we looked at, hey, can you process payments? Can you serve players from here or there? Today, our starting point will always be, what are the regulations? What are the standards? And this is how everything will be defined, if you want. That's why we say that our journey starts here. And obviously, we tend to, as this industry matures, we tend to kind of go into from moving from what used to be gray area into more of a distinct separation between regulated and non-regulated markets. And remember, even markets where gambling is banned are regulated markets. There's very clear regulation of what we can do or cannot do. And then we also understand that there's different variations, right? There's markets where gambling is forbidden altogether. There are regions that have local regulations that allow some form of online gaming. There's some markets where some verticals are allowed and others are not allowed. Some places have gaming only given by law to state-owned monopolies. There's all kind of variations, but we need to understand the landscape before we jump in and before we even make our business case. When we look at how the industry has evolved or matured, I like to say that we kind of moved from what we call the no country to the dot country. Back in the days, you operated with a .com. You took mostly players from all over the world. You may have chosen to ban some players from some countries due to higher risk, but altogether you had one operation that was working across multiple jurisdictions. Then, around 2010, or maybe even a little earlier, following all kind of changes, we're starting to see more and more of like the dot country, .fr, .es. These are operations that are specifically tailored and licensed by local authorities. And as such, what we've noticed is that sometimes there's really no common regulation or no common platform solution or requirements between two different markets. They could be neighboring markets, but it could be very, very different. So the challenge here became that in order to operate in multiple markets, we needed to adhere to different regulations and sometimes even support and operate a completely different structure if it comes to our tools that we use, if it comes to our compliance requirement, if it comes to payment and other things. So this is kind of the movement that we're going through, and this is something that will continue. So basically, in the old days, even it was .com, we've seen very strong presence of regional licensing. We've seen licenses obviously from Malta and from Canarake and from Curacao still is a strong one and others, and they had their advantages. But then we started to see that the importance or the opportunity that comes with those regional licenses is slowly diminishing, and more opportunities are being presented by the local regulation, local authorities. And here, like I said, we're looking at higher taxes, different requirements, more challenging access to markets in some places, etc. So this is kind of the direction, and this is where our industry is going. And this is important because it affects a lot of the things that we do. It also affects a lot of the choice that we have when we come to operate in terms of the product that we have out there, the content, the platforms, the tools that can support us. Do they understand and can they support the new environment, which is a country by country regulation? Are they the right solution for what we need, or are they more geared towards what we consider to be the regional licensing, which is okay, yet we need to understand that not everybody that fits in the regional licensing can quickly transition into what we call the local regulation and licensing environment. So this is kind of the idea that will carry us through a lot of the pieces of this training, because again, it will impact how our platform is built, how our services are built, what's the risk appetite of our providers, of ourselves as an operator, etc. When we talk about regulation, we need to understand who are the actors in this. So obviously, we have first the regulators, and the regulators are essentially in charge of defining the rules and conditions for participation in the gaming market. Okay, they also define the standards for the gaming operation and offering. So basically, what is allowed, what is not allowed, who can participate, how everything is being enforced. All of those elements are essentially created by the regulators. Sometimes there will be a political layer, politician that will, by law, pass a law that says, yeah, this is legal or not legal. However, regulators, different forms of them, will come and will have to define those details for the most part. Then there are the gaming standards. Okay, so these are the rules and conditions that the regulators set. Okay, this is our book that tells us what we can or cannot do, how our organization needs to look like, what kind of technical requirements we have, what kind of operational standards and requirements we have, responsible gaming, all kind of things like that. How do we verify players? And this is where we start to see that, this is the rule book. This is what we need to abide by. And if we don't, we risk losing our license if we are in a regulated environment. The third piece is testing and certification. And depending on the jurisdiction, this may be required, right? This is essentially a way to prove that your solution, your platform, your operation meets the gaming standards that were defined by the regulators. Sometimes it will be done by third-party labs, independent labs that have their own standards, like PMM and GLI, and there are others that will do that. Sometimes the regulators themselves will have their own testing labs, and they will test things themselves and certify them. Okay. There are some commonalities across regions when it comes to testing and certification, and then there are areas that are completely different. Some jurisdictions will require us to certify each and every game that we have specifically for this environment. Others will say, okay, if it was certified by a different jurisdiction that we accept, then that's good enough. We can just transfer that certification. So there's all these details that we're going to need to understand and look into. Then we get a license. This is an authorization to operate. And some licenses can be very, very hard to obtain, and some can be extremely easy. And this is essentially the meaning of what is more considered to be more of a strict jurisdiction versus what is more of a, let's say, relaxed type of environment. Usually, the more strict we see it, we'll leave it to you to decide how you consider yourself and your strategy in specific markets. However, again, there are some relaxed environment where you can do a lot more things, and there are more stricter environment where the processes and the challenges that you have to go through in order to obtain a license, in order to remain in operation, is higher. And these are just the conditions that we need to accept. Okay, so license can be as hard as can get in order to allow us to operate, and can be very, very simple. Sometimes there are environments that don't even require a license from you. However, you will see that some third-party providers will require a license, right? So if you go and operate in markets that don't really have any licensing environment or regulations around them, you'll see that not all providers, like game providers and payment providers, will even agree to work with you unless you have some sort of a license. So from then, we move on to the platform and content, because this have a direct influence, basically, or regulation will have a direct influence on the platform and the content. So just like we saw that essentially the regulatory environment has evolved from the no country to the dot country, we're now seeing that the platforms evolved as well. And this is with, taking it from perception of time, that essentially how we started and where we are now and why it's important to understand all of that. So if you look back at the 25 years of essentially this industry operating online, for those of you who started back in the early 2000s, probably remember that we started with closed platforms. What does that mean? What it means is that each operator, or most operators, definitely the big ones, created their own technology in-house. And their technology also housed a lot of the services that they developed in-house, which means that we had the platform, the player account management system. We had direct all of the different tools that we needed, be it marketing tools, be it fraud tools. We integrated with payment. That usually is something that was external, but even content to begin with was developed in-house. So the games that you could find on one operator were solely created for that operator, and you could not find them with others. And then something evolved, and the next stage of the platform was we started to see providers that started to make their content, their games, available to others. That required the platform provider to start to understand how we integrate content. That was not a given. Today, it's pretty much a given. But back then, that was not a given. So how do you integrate content? How do you differentiate yourself in an environment where pretty much every operator can put their hands on the same games from different providers? And how do you walk around that? So that required the operators, the platform providers, to start adding additional skills and additional capabilities with content integration. That was a big step in the evolvement of our industry. Today, what we're seeing is that we're moving towards what we call a fully customizable platform, whereas really the platform, and we'll talk about that in a second, provide a lot of the core functions and services and rely heavily on integrations. And this provides a lot of flexibility for the operators and kind of changes the role of the platform from developing things always and to a mix of developing functions, but also constantly integrating and giving their operators as many options as they can have. And this is essentially what we consider today a fully customizable platform. So this is kind of the transition. Now, why do we talk about the history so much? Why do we talk about the regulated environment in the .com era, or why do we talk about closed platforms? Because those operations, those platforms did not disappear from this world. They still operate, and some of them operate quite successfully. So maybe they're not in the closed platform era so much, but many of them are still pretty much just in content integration, and they do everything else. And like I said, many platforms are only meant to service what we call the gray area, and they don't have some of the functions and features. So what I'm trying to explain here is that there's no one standard for platforms. There's no one standard for type of operation. They really vary, and there's no right or wrong, but if you are out there shopping for a platform, shopping for services, you need to understand the history of how these services were created, what use cases were they built in mind when they were created, so that you can understand if this is a solution that's right for the markets that you're going to go to, or for your current environment, or if it's something that may not be a good fit, because really finding that right partnership is critical. So then, and again, this is just a small sample of this training, so I'm kind of speeding through certain things here. Then we're going to explaining and understanding what is the back office platform. What we call them the heart of the gaming operation, and why are they so important? Eventually, what are the tools that you'll find in an environment? What are the core functions, and what are the functions, the ones that you see on the right, that we'll often see based on integrations? Okay, so in the training, we'll go deep into what are the functions of a player account management. What does the wallet do? Why do we need admin functions to determine who can have access to which information and not? What are the expectations from responsible gaming module that we have? What kind of anti-money laundering tools we can have built into the system? It comes to automated reporting and detections and things of that sort. The content management system. There's a lot of variations out there of content management system, one being how do we manage the front end on the site? How do we manage, sorry, whoever it is, please mute yourself, thank you. How do we manage the content on the site? How do we manage content on apps? But it's not just the written text and the images, it's also the gaming content. How do we tailor our games to different jurisdictions and different players and all of that stuff? What are retention tools do we have? Is there any automation built in? Is there a reward system? Is there a loyalty system that are built in? So all of those elements, we're going to go and dive deep into in the training. Same goes for promotional tools like bonuses, campaigns, tournaments, both in terms of management and tracking, and just explaining what they each do. Then we get into what we often see to be serviced or offered through integrations, reporting, BI systems, payment processing, and the different requirements and options that they bring, marketing, both for tracking and attribution, for user acquisition, for retention, gaming content, of course, be it casino games, be it sports betting, be it any other vertical. Geofencing is becoming more and more critical, especially in markets where it's not a single country, but rather states within a country, like in the US or in Germany and some other places. The requirement for geofencing and the options out there are very different, and the influence that these things have on the user journey, the user experience, on the overall way the players play the game are very critical. And then obviously KYC, know your customer. What do we do in order to understand who is this player that is playing? How do we make sure that they're over the legal age, that they're not part of any type of restricted list, that they're not, politically exposed people, or all kind of things like that. And again, this can be determined by the regulator and dictated to you at the minimum, or it can also be your own best practices or your platform's best practices. So there's all kind of things to learn about that, and we'll touch on all of these topics. Jumping then into, so as you remember, we basically went through some of those circles here. Jumping quickly into gaming content. And in gaming content, starting with casino, we understand that in today's world, and we'll take into assumption that the majority of operators nowadays will rely on integrated content. We like to separate those content into four primary types. So essentially, when we look at the casino industry, what are the games that we find out there? And the first group of content providers or game providers is what we consider to be the pure online game providers. These are companies that, or let's call them even studios. What they do is create games for online distribution. This is primarily what they do. This is their expertise. They understand what content will work with players in which markets. They are all about developing. They're all about securing IP for different games. So that's how you see all kind of collaboration between brands and between movies and whatnot. This is what they do, and their expertise is to develop those games, to certify them, to distribute them. On the other side of this is, and we see that both obviously in Europe and in the US, but we tend to look at the land-based game providers. These ones still and will continue to service primarily the land-based environment. The games that they provide may also be added and offered online, but they are first created for a land-based environment, which has completely different rules, completely different mechanics, completely different business altogether. Okay, so here we will see names like Novomatic and Scientific Games, or Light and Wonder they call now, or Socrato, IGT. And again, their core activity is land-based, but they are slowly moving towards pushing games online as well. We then look at specialty content providers, and specialty content providers are the ones that will provide the sort of live casino and lottery content and any type of local game variants and things of that sort. So again, they may do traditional slots or traditional casino games, but for the most part, they are dedicated to these categories that have different requirements. Now, in a normal environment, depending on the operational model, you as the operator or your platform provider will contract with each one of those providers directly. That means that you need to both maintain the technical connection into the remote gaming server of those providers, but also you need to essentially go through the contracting and the due diligence and on a day-to-day commercial management and all of those things that are involved in working with each of those service providers. And here we have an option, which is essentially the aggregators. The aggregators, instead of telling you, hey, go now, and if you want to get content from 30 different providers, go now and directly integrate with 30 of them, because that takes you a lot of, it's a lot of effort, both to establish that integration and maintain it. The aggregator will say, no, we are literally aggregating all of this content. Think of it as pipelines, right? Instead of sending pipelines or establishing pipelines from your platform or your remote gaming server to all of these different providers, you just go and you connect to one aggregator who already has all of these pipelines established, and you get it through them. Those aggregators, Aliyah, our sponsor being one of them, their job is to ensure that those integrations are always up to date, that they are stable, that they function properly. Their job is to continue to integrate all the time. And a lot of the time, by the way, they can also provide you with better commercial terms, because they work on volumes across multiple operators, where if you were to go directly, you'll have to negotiate your own deal. So aggregators is something that you definitely may want to consider. It is a great way for you to get a lot of content immediately, rather than slowly growing through integrations. Continuing on with gaming content, what we're seeing is that essentially, if we do our job right as operators, we get a lot of content. We can have hundreds, we can have more than 1,000 games that is offered to our players. In the casino environment, that's a lot to navigate. How can we help our players find what they want? And this is where our platform will usually offer us all kind of segmentations and categorizations, so that we can help our players find what they want. The faster they find it, the more they'll play, right? If you end up as a player, navigating through a lot of games until you find something, it's really, really challenging. Think of it as those evenings that you spend in front of Netflix and you just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, and you just don't know what you want to watch, because if it wasn't categorized, just like TV shows, all right? This is pretty much the same. So we're going to essentially, and this is a function of the platform. Not all platforms are built the same, and not all of them offer all of this, but we may want to categorize the games to slots and table games and live dealers and games with jackpot or skill games or arcade games or dice games, whichever it is that you decide to define it. And some games can fit in multiple categories. Then we can do segmentations that may include, hey, these are your favorites that you had. And again, you'll be surprised, not all platform providers even allow you as a player to mark your favorite game or to show the ones that you recently played or the ones that are recommended based on previous selections or themed games. Hey, Christmas is coming. Here are all the Christmas games or the summer games or the World Cup games, whatever it is. And then there's filtering by provider, by volatility, by return to player, by game mechanics. There's all kind of things like that that help us help the players essentially. If we look at an example, this is for my US operator, Golden Nugget, and I bring it as an example because there's a lot of games. And if you look on the right side, this is when it's a long scroll in the app. That's a lot of games to navigate. However, what you can see is that they provide you with a lot of options to either filter or segment so that you can have a more focused view of what you need to see or what you're interested in seeing. So there's a lot of techniques and there's a lot of ways to go and tackle this and manage this. And this is one of the things that we'll be reviewing in the training as well. When it comes to sports betting, and I'll touch on it really briefly, it's kind of different in the sense that there are different components that add up into the sports betting offering. Okay. Usually when we look at the offering, we rely on 4 components, and altogether, at least 3 of them are critical, and they all come together to form the sports betting offering. The first is data. Okay, so if we look at data, essentially this is official information that tells us which games are being played or matches, who's playing, and obviously what are the official results. And again, we know that results can be the end results, or it could be what happened a minute ago. These are all things that require really reliable data. Usually, almost always, this is provided by third parties. You as an operator are not expected to go and monitor all of these games. You get a feed, and if you run your own sports betting, even then you'll get a feed, and this is your baseline. Then there's the element of trading and pricing. Okay, so here we generate the odds that are being offered to the customers, and those are based on algorithms, by historical and comparative analysis. We look at what competitors are doing. There's a whole art of trading and pricing, and we can offer them pre-match, and we can also offer that in live betting. And the reality is that this is a very dynamic space. We keep on managing and changing that. And in the training, we'll touch somewhat on how the whole sports betting side works, especially when it comes to trading and pricing, and how we get into ensuring profitability and balancing our books and things of that sort. Depending on the size of the operator, this will be provided by a third party or can sometimes be managed in-house. Then there's the element of risk and liability. Now that we got people basically taking our trade and odds proposal, now we see, how do we have any risk? Is there any liability? Do we need to balance things? Okay, so now we assess constantly where we stand. Who are those players that try to, are we accepting those bets from those players? Are we overexposed on one end or the other? As things in the market change, did someone get injured? Are things switching in favor of someone else? Do we need to alter things? So this is risk and liability here too. Can be provided via third parties or can be managed in-house. Then there's the streaming and everything that has to do with the visual representation of the games. And this is something that can be as simple as just showing some graphics on the screen, or can be even streaming the games live. This is something that started and becoming more and more popular. It's not cheap, but it is something that definitely can separate between 2 operators. And this is almost always provided by a third party. So this is kind of going over quickly on sports betting, and we're going to dive again in the training much deeper into that. And this is just a quick example of, again, a US sports betting provider, in this case BetMGM, and how things are organized in order to ensure that, again, the players can find whatever they need to. Other game content like poker or bingo, those are different. They require, poker is a liquidity-based game, so we don't really see too many operators that offer their own network of poker because it's fairly hard to maintain. What we're seeing is that we have more of networks that will aggregate players from multiple operators, and essentially each of those players will have their own, let's call it custom environment. They think they play with this provider, but they understand that there are other players from different operators as well. Bingo, same here, similar to poker. It's a community game. There's a lot about ensuring that there's liquidity, that there's enough players playing around the same time and around the same type of tables or odds. And the management of what is being offered, when do we open tables, when do we close them, how do we engage the users. So this is always an effort between the network and the operators. We can touch more on that in the training if there are people that are interested in that, but obviously bingo is very specific to some markets, and overall poker is somewhat seeing a decline, so we're not focusing too much on that. Payments is another area that we'll be touching in the training, and kind of spinning through some of those things that we have here. When we talk about payments, and we look at it as probably one of the key aspects of gaming operators, because if we cannot take money from players and cannot pay them back, we can have the best product out there, but it won't matter. And there's a lot of advancement and changes within payments, and that will heavily rely on the environment that you're in and the risk that your operation is essentially be seen at as in the eyes of the payment providers. The riskier it is, the less regulated it is, normally the cost of that will be higher. There's also elements of what is the due diligence and the scrutiny that you're going to have to go through when it comes to the payments. So in the training, we go over and describe a lot of the process of, first of all, the options that we have. What do they serve? What are the best practices to have around payments? What are the other challenges that come when it comes to payments and banking in general? And something that, again, requires its own expertise. It's not the primary focus of the training, but it's definitely something that operators, especially smaller and new operators, need to address. Payment is definitely not a given, it's not a guaranteed. And usually if there's one thing that can make or break your operation, payment would be it. Same goes for marketing. In the training, we have two dedicated modules for marketing. Traditionally, we like to look at marketing separated into user acquisition and retention. And here too, a lot of what we can do, should do, or should essentially, let's say, contemplate doing, is related to the environment that we're in. If we are in less regulated environments, we normally will have less options. And therefore, that's why we're seeing a lot of reliance on user acquisition through affiliates and SEO. Whereas if we have a more regulated environment, we will see a lot more options, but that will require us a lot more in-house skills and usually a lot more funding, right? Now we need to be able to do TV and print and massive amount of programmatic, which may or may not be available to us if we're in a less regulated environment. So these are all type of considerations on how we manage ourselves. Retention, here too, we essentially dedicate one of the days, out of the 5 days, we dedicate one of the days to retention. And here we talk about elements of how we influence retention. What are the things, what are the components that come into retention, be it how we choose what to communicate when and to whom. What are the communication channels that we have for purpose of retention? What are the objectives? What are the tactics that we can have? So there's elements like loyalty, there's elements like promotions, there's elements like VIP management. How do we evaluate our efforts? How do we calculate the different KPIs and churns? So we'll touch on that as much as we can and time allow. So this is essentially what I kind of talked about when it comes to our options and opportunities with marketing and regulation. That's kind of the first thing. And that's why we ask ourselves, what is the regulatory environment that we're in? And these are the considerations that we have. When we talk about player protection, the other side to it is obviously operator protection. These are the type of things that are becoming a top priority by most regulators these days. Okay, some of them are more common, others are less common. But things like responsible gaming, what do we need to offer? What kind of tools do we make available to our players to manage their game, to ensure that we detect and that we offer support and tools, not just to manage, but also to get some assistance for players that have problem gambling issues. How do we ensure that that only players of certain age, of legal age, can be accessed? There's a lot of tools today that can help us manage that and essentially ensure that we only allow players that are supposed to be in our system. All of this not only helps us to do the right thing, it also helps us in front of the regulator because we're complying with the requirements, and it helps us with the payment providers and with the content providers, because nobody wants to work with someone that is negligent and that may allow underage people or problem gamblers into their operation. Tools like account and game history information, any options for security, be it passport, be it two-factor authentication, be it other things, elements like RNG certification, license and certificates. Are those games certified? Do we need to disclose the RTP to the players, give them a choice? Do we need to audit prizes independently to ensure that all of a sudden the let's say the winners of any promotions are not our cousins or employees? How do we resolve complaints? What is the mechanism for dispute resolution? All of those things usually will be dictated by the regulator. And if they're not, there are definitely things that we need to embrace, I will say, regardless of the environment that we're in. But you'll be surprised, some people don't understand why it's needed. So we'll go into details on that as well. The other side to this is, how do we protect ourselves from fraud? How do we ensure that players are not charging back? How do we ensure that we have alert systems? So all of those things are things that we'll discuss. Lastly, and I'll finish with that, we're going to be talking about operational models. And when somebody wants to sell things to you, they'll promise you a lot of things. Usually you'll realize that these things are becoming challenging when you start operating or we start receiving what you paid for. And this is where we need to understand what we're getting ourselves into if we are an operator that is looking to work with a third-party platform provider. So largely speaking, we have three options. One is platform services. You get the platform, you only get the platform, the PAM, the player account management, and some of the services. You take care of the rest. You build your own team to do pretty much all of the functions. And this is probably the version that will cost you the least when it comes to how much you pay for your platform, but requires you to build your own team. The other side to that is what we call an operational white label. Okay. Now, keep in mind, and we'll talk about it in training, there's operational white label and there's like a licensing white label. When it comes, licensing white label is something different that I won't get into right now. But an operational white label essentially says, you know what, you are an operator, you have traffic. I don't know, you have a great website, you are a magazine, you have all of the players that you need. You just need to send them to a place where they're going to play under your brand, but you don't want to get involved in any of the operation. So an operational white label could be a solution for you where you are primarily responsible for traffic, for sending players in, and someone else, your platform provider, takes care of everything else for you. And that's a model that can work as long as you know who does what and we manage expectations. And then there's the trickiest part, in my opinion, which is turnkey. Because everybody likes to use the word turnkey, not everybody understands what it really means. In other words, people have different definitions for the word turnkey and different expectations. When somebody says turnkey, sometimes they say, I don't want to deal with anything. And other times, when a turnkey provider says that they offer turnkey, they only mean that they offer some services. So here, whenever I hear turnkey, this is like this little red flag that kind of is being raised, and that prompts us to ask a lot of questions. Who does what? Who is responsible for what? What are the levels of services? Now, again, this is a great option. Don't get me wrong. However, it requires some good due diligence to understanding who does what are the services, what falls under us, what falls under others. And once everybody is in the clear and understand what it is, then they can move on to operating. So this is essentially the brief intro, one of the chapters of the training. The training is, like I said, in its online version, it's a 5-day training. The next course starts on June 5th, and it goes for 5 days. We meet 3 hours per day online via Zoom. The idea is to make it a very interactive training. These are not huge groups. Everybody can talk, everybody can ask, everybody can propose their views and ideas. There's no right or wrong. Like I said, different operators in different markets are meeting different scenarios. They are meeting different market requirements. And the idea is to understand how to tackle them, but also to share and understand what's going on out there in other markets and in other types of operations. The idea is to make it very hands-on, meaning we have exercises. Those that will participate will do some math. We'll practice some of the things. It's not just about me talking, but rather also about people really getting a feel for it. And the logic behind it is that it doesn't matter if you're the CEO, if you're just getting started, there are certain things that you need to do once if you're part of this industry, some things that you need to do once and experience it yourself. So, like I said, part of the modules that we have, we start with the online gaming ecosystem. We talk about gaming economy and revenue stream. How do we make money across the different verticals? We talk about gaming content. You've seen a taste of this. We get into more details there. We talk about protection measures for operators and for players. So anything that has to do with fraud, responsible gaming, anti-money laundering, etc. Bonus management, primarily geared towards casino. This is where we dive deep into how we not overexpose ourselves. How do we calculate certain KPIs that are involved with our offering? All of those things. This is one of the more intense modules that we have in this training, in this course, and it's one that I think a lot of people just don't really understand. They just copy what the other operator is doing, but it is important that you fully understand the details there. We then go on to talk about player acquisition and the marketing channels, marketing technology, the marketing mix, all of those type of things together. We have a session about player retention, promotions, loyalty, and VIP management. And then we finished with, okay, we take all of this information. How do we do some proper business planning? How all of this, because these represent cost and revenue and opportunities, how did it all come together in a balance sheet? And then, and I'll be sharing templates for you guys to take and work with and keep, obviously. And then lastly, it's about what do we want to take? What do each want to take away from this? What are the next steps for us individually? And a lot of the time we can have it grouped, or we can also have some breakout sessions. The idea is really to ensure that we address all of the questions that you have. You may be an operator, you may be a platform provider, you may be a content provider in the industry, you may be an affiliate. We all have our questions. The idea is, hey, you understand what everybody is doing. You understand the industry, you understand now the operation, you understand how everybody is making money. But if you have specific questions, if you have things that you really need to resolve, the objective is not to leave you at the end of these 5 days with no answers, but rather to address this. And sometimes we'll open it as a group and we'll say, you know what, this is what I think, but it doesn't mean that it's the only option. Maybe other people have other ideas as well. So this is where we are. Like I said, the training is between June 5th to 9th. It will, I believe, be I'm in the US, so in my early morning hours, probably in the afternoon in Europe. And like I said, Gaming Operations Academy and Aliyah are the ones organizing this. Any information can be found here on the Gaming Operations Academy website. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Adam or to myself here, and we can ask some questions here if you have any. So this is the time. Unmute yourself, get on camera, ask whatever you want. I'm here. And if you're shy, you can type the question too in the chat. Any question? Anything about the training or about anything that I've went over today?
Itzhak, I would like to receive information for the next course that you were talking now.
Okay.
From June the 5th to the 9th. Adam has got my LinkedIn and my email. If you can receive from him or from you a specific about the.
Yes, sure. If you can type in directly to me in the chat your email, I'll send it to you, and I will make sure that Adam follows up with you as well. And thank you for your interest. Okay.
Perfect.
Any more questions? All right. Thank you, Sandra. Anyone else? Any other questions?
No, for me, I'm okay.
Okay. Again, this is my email. You can, actually, maybe we have some more. All right. Okay, so there's a question if there are introductional courses too. So this course, while we label it to be, this is a question from Shalmina. This course, while we label it to be, more advanced for executive, etc., I don't know that we have one that is simplified. Maybe Adam can address that. There are specific training that I do on affiliate marketing. So it's just dedicated to affiliate marketing and to marketing. And there's definitely ways to, if it's for a company or something, create some custom content that is geared towards people. If you don't mind reaching out to me directly or to Adam, and we can understand better your needs and see if there's something that's available either through Adam and other trainers that he has, or through me. So that was in response to Shalmina. And again, I don't know if there are any other questions. It was my pleasure to have you here, and I hope to see some of you, maybe even all of you, in the training or in the next webinar that we do. And obviously, feel free to get in touch through LinkedIn with any questions or anything else that you have. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.